Little Lord Fauntleroy
is now joining the call.
Water is used as a motif throughout the entirety of Succession's run. It represents, in particular, Kendall's troubles and melancholy. Although he is shown to occasionally find peace and freedom within said water, it is of course linked to an explicit trauma in his life, and presents itself at periods of high anxiety and sadness. These visuals resonate with Kendall's traits as a character. He is an addict, and the main things he finds himself addicted to, whether it be drugs or his unrelenting obsession with becoming CEO and gaining his father's approval, bring with them these two opposing and extreme emotions. He can find himself basking in elation or drowning in his troubles. In their essay, and a bit of a mouthful, Film in Depth, Water and Immersivity in the Contemporary Film Experience, Adriano de Aloia writes that the narrative role of water is functional to the eliciting of emotions. Spectators experience a sense of immersion as if they have been placed in the space of representation. And this is something Succession does successfully. That's not really a joke, just two words that sound similar, I guess. I don't know if this is me being too literal, but the most emotive and impactful sequence of the show from the character's point of view, the three siblings finding out about their father's death, takes place on a boat, isolating them from the rest of the company and the world. In his final moments on the show, Kendall is totally numb. He has lost his kids, his father, very probably his siblings, and most importantly to him, the one thing he threw them all away for. There are no high emotions here, no elation, no anger or sadness. He is broken and simply existing in the absence of meaning that he has forged for himself over the last 4 seasons. And to represent that, there is a separation between him and the ocean that usually facilitates his emotional baggage. The audience's immersion with his extreme emotions are fading because at this moment he's lost the purpose and drive that fueled them. Succession refers to Shakespeare a number of times throughout its run.
Mine honor is my life. Both grow in one, take honor from me, and my life is done.
And this makes sense because the show is ultimately a tragedy, and the sort of ending we got here was always a foregone conclusion. I see comparisons to King Lear, and the idea of this king's constant quest for power is definitely valid, but I always viewed Kendall as a Hamlet figure. Aside from the play also utilising the imagery of water to convey turmoil and mental instability, it depicts a king's son on a quest to make his great father proud, a father he idolises in spite of their differing worldviews, and he is tormented by the daunting task of fulfilling a monumental legacy. Although both Hamlet and Kendall fail in preventing the man who killed their father from gaining power of the kingdom and prevailing as king, it is mentioned a few times that Kendall and Roman genuinely seem to believe, or at least in some part blame, Matson for causing their father's death. I think it's the differences separating these two failures that really fascinate me with Kendall as a character. Hamlet's failure, in so much that he was unable to avenge and succeed his father in the way that was intended, was fueled by an intense introspection of himself, the morality of the world around him, and his place within that world. And in addition to it probably taking him 4 hours to order a fucking coffee, this indecision and contemplation is what ultimately led to the tragic outcome of events depicted in that play. And although Kendall definitely shares Hamlet's gift for poetry,
Cunt is as cunt does.
he does not share his burden of introspection. After all, Kendall is a man who performed this masterpiece without a shred of irony.
L to the OG, dude be the OG, and he playin'.
It is Kendall's unbelievable arrogance and brashness that led to his downfall, and from the first episode we can see how that arrogance and lack of self-awareness manifests itself in his character. It's established very early on, and it never really changes.
We're not crazy about the media sector. We're not crazy about how your father has treated our relationship, and our position is to seek recruitment.
Oh, come on, man. Fuck off.
and they're sure to let you know very early on that Logan also recognizes this.
You are a fucking idiot.
In fact, the only indecisions that slow or halt Kendall on his quest to succeed Logan are due to his other siblings battling for the same position they also have no real right or ability to claim. And although Succession doesn't end with the mass death of its titular characters, in his final 2 scenes, Kendall is certainly a ghost of his former self, a man lamenting upon his mistakes and coming to terms with the reality of what life will be like after being forced out of his father's shadow and left to build his own legacy anew.
Little Lord Fauntleroy
has left the call.
So I started watching Succession 2 weeks before the series finale aired, and by the time I had caught up on all the previous episodes, I was able to watch that finale as it went out, because when I start watching a show, I am guzzling that shit down as fast as possible. I refuse to ration my entertainment. To be honest, I'd like to just have a casual chat about the season finale and throw some thoughts out into the old thought void. As a result, this video is going to be a little unstructured and all over the place, but fuck it, we're going full Nazchoz on holiday vibes. The series finale always elicits a very interesting response, because I think it tends to separate an audience who are engaging solely for the plots from an audience who are watching for the characters and story. Succession was always a show about trauma and how that trauma manifests itself in an environment where the characters are totally enabled to do as they please and focus on nothing other than self-indulgence. So yes, the main plot focuses on the mad scramble to become CEO of the company, but there was never going to be a victor here. The show is about how the characters' trauma prevent them from accepting anyone being crowned king. The 3 siblings are legacy babies, and the process of seeing someone else essentially be deemed more worthy of daddy's love and respect is just too painful to take, as we see in the final scenes they share together. And I think the show concludes with an incredibly natural, and I mean this in the most positive way possible, predictable ending if you're paying attention. The only criticism I have regarding plot as we wave goodbye to this show is the fact that it seems to have a few rough edges. The siblings buying up Pierce seemed as though it should be more significant and return in a substantial way, especially considering it is said to wield an enormous amount of influence in previous seasons. I appreciate the actor who plays Shiv was pregnant in real life and the writers probably accommodated for that, but considering the show is built around family trauma and Shiv has an incredibly fractured relationship with her own mother,
I should have had dogs. No, you could have had dogs.
I feel like the prospect of Shiv as a mother could have been more fleshed out, especially since that was a large tension between her and Tom throughout the show. I don't feel like her hiding the pregnancy from Tom went anywhere too interesting, and beyond him utilizing her insecurities surrounding motherhood as a weapon during a heated argument,
I think you are incapable of love, and I think you are maybe not a good person to have children.
we don't get a whole lot to sink our teeth into. I also feel like the impact of the election was pretty absent in the finale itself. I understand that it acts as a catalyst for Kendall's family finally upping and leaving him, but I think having more of the chaotic fallout we saw in episode 9 be a backdrop to the manic energy of the finale would have been pretty fun, and it would also just reinforce how damaging their decisions have been throughout the series as they dramatically fall from grace. But hey, these are tiny elements that don't especially impact the character's journey, and I do think plot points like the Pierce purchase, the rocket explosion / dick pics, and the election not having much of an influence as we move throughout the rest of the show ultimately works in its favour, in so much that their decisions don't have repercussions they directly have to face. They're secluded in their own family psychodrama, and everything else is background noise and cannon fodder. People's lives were definitely ruined by Kendall's rocket launch, which is treated as a bit of a joke since we're so removed from his actions.
But Sarah, on that point,
I'm not a rocket scientist.
But then at the same time, we feel empathy for him during his father's funeral as he processes the grief of what it's like to lose a loved one. These are bad people who only really feel remorse for themselves, but the show cleverly allows us into that inner circle and sort of enter a similar state of seclusion for those 4 seasons. Even Kendall, who clearly feels an enormous amount of guilt and regret over the car accident in season 1, is only so heavily affected because it is an immediate, direct, and personal event that he experiences. And even here, he is shielded from the repercussions. Those around him, like Logan and his siblings, feign pity and understanding to later weaponize as a manipulation tactic. And Kendall himself, albeit in a state of desperation, is willing to deny the event ever happened in the pursuit of personal gain. The young boy who lost his life only has a lasting presence because he is an important chess piece in the family's insane psychodrama. My favourite thing about Succession is that from the get-go, there are no real stakes. The outcome of this episode is their father's company being sold off in return for an incredibly generous payout. They all earn millions of dollars on top of their already vast amount of personal wealth, and this is brilliantly framed as a loss. It is the perfect way to depict a section of society who will never have enough. Money means nothing, and their obsession with status and power is a poison that runs through every one of their veins. As I said previously in the video, for the 3 siblings, becoming CEO equates to being the person Daddy respects and trusts the most. And as people who grew up pretty devoid of love and affection, this means everything and is a pretty suitable, bastardized replacement of that missing love. I think this is why Kendall so often battles to be viewed as the quote-unquote eldest son. It automatically puts him in a position more worthy of that love and respect.
When I was 7, he sat me down at the Candy Kitchen in Bridgehampton, and he fucking promised it to me. I'm the eldest boy! I am the eldest boy!
Losing his father's empire would be like losing the bond and connection Kendall thought he had established with his father all those years ago. Connor is almost irrelevant to Kendall in this respect because he doesn't share the same drive for power and approval of his father.
The good thing about having a family that doesn't love you is you learn to live without it. You're needy love sponges. And I'm a plant that grows on rocks and lives off insects that die inside of me.
Connor was seemingly born at a period when Logan probably wanted kids for the sake of having kids, and the 3 siblings were created purely for the purpose of preserving his empire. So for Connor, it was probably easier to accept his father's relationship for what it was. You were never going to get a well done or a pat on the back, because how could you with this man? I think their differing views on Logan is most apparent towards the end of season 3.
I didn't see Pop for 3 years. But your spoon wasn't shiny enough. Huh? It is not all about you.
But in the finale, we see that Connor shared a connection and love with his father that the other 3 never had. When Logan was hosting a dinner party, laughing, having fun, and appearing more human than ever, Kendall, Shiv, and Roman aren't present, not invited, locked out and only able to watch the type of connection they never had unfold on the TV. And in this sense, they missed out on 2 forms of connection, because they also ultimately failed in becoming CEO. They are legacy babies without a legacy to uphold. And although Connor's story isn't a supremely happy one, his relationship with Willa is very similar to the relationship he has with his father. Imperfect and lacking in a mutual sort of love, but ultimately, I think he will be content and find peace with the connection that he does have. It's very fitting that his wedding and the death of his father happen on the same day. And the siblings' personal relationships also reflect the one they have with their father, in the sense that there is a great absence. Roman is totally unable to be sexual and vulnerable with his partners, and instead experiences that sexual intimacy through a form of sadomasochism. Kendall throws his family aside in pursuit of becoming CEO, and Shiv is unable to express love in a genuinely meaningful way to those close to her out of fear of being rejected or fucked over.
It's not my fault that you didn't get his approval.
I have given you endless approval, and it doesn't fill you up because you're broken.
Connor is often mocked as being stupid or incapable of being involved in the business, but ironically, the main siblings are also completely out of their depth. At first, I was unsure as to why we were focusing on the dojo deal for the remainder of season 4. It felt like Logan leftovers, but that is to some extent a clear demonstration of their ineptitude. His kids spend all season fighting over the details of a deal Logan would have probably brokered in the afternoon he got off the plane. As Logan pointed out, in probably the most honest and genuine moment he shared with his kids, they are not serious people. If the kids had stopped the dojo deal from going through, their legacy would be fighting off one crisis after another without progressing the company into anything greater, as demonstrated by the tedious and ongoing negotiations with Matsson right through to the finale. To wrap up the video, I want to leave you with some thoughts I have on Shiv, and more specifically her role in the finale. I'll start off by saying I think the idea that Shiv actively moving against Kendall in his rise to power is out of character, or the show wanting to have a twist, if you can call it that, in the final act, is just straight up wrong and a complete misreading of her as a character. This right here?
I don't think you'd be good at it.
What? I don't even believe you. I don't believe you.
I don't think that you would be good at this.
For fuck's sake!
Is 100% consistent with who she is as a person. These characters have done nothing but plot and scheme and prevent their peers from claiming the role of CEO. The coronation of their father's empire is something that has plagued their lives since childhood, and the idea that Shiv, of all people, would simply allow Kendall to take that from her at the end here is bizarre. Celebrating and crowning her brother as king in the heat of the moment after finding out she's about to be fucked over by Matsson and her husband is one thing, but seeing him sit in the throne, the chair their father once ran his entire operation from, is a whole other story. Both Roman and Shiv are visibly troubled by the reality of what this decision actually means, and unlike Roman, who is a character that folds easily under pressure, as we saw in the season 1 board meeting, Shiv was just never going to fuck with the idea of Kendall becoming CEO. And honestly, you can understand why Shiv arrives at the conclusion that it would be more beneficial to have her husband in the position of a pseudo-CEO yes-man than her sibling. She found herself in an identical situation earlier in the season when Kendall and Roman temporarily seized control, and she was burned by it. Her power was minimized and her presence seemed to be an irritant. Shiv sitting in the car, reluctantly holding her husband's hand, turned her into the very thing she had been rallying against for the entire show. At this moment, she is no longer what she described at her father's funeral as a whole woman. She is a silent wife sitting on the sideline, waiting for an opportunity to potentially wield some influence. At the top of the show, Shiv was her own person, a whole person with a life and a career outside of the mess that is her family. But just like everyone else, she was pulled into the mud pit and sold out her beliefs in pursuit of power, in pursuit of her father's approval. Just like everyone else, Shiv is fallible. She has a sickness, and that sickness is Logan Roy. Roman claiming the whole thing is bullshit at the end of the show could have easily been a coping mechanism and genuine exhaustion at the process of desperately clawing at the greasy pole to no avail, but I think this, in addition to his final shots alone at the bar, is demonstrating a realization that the whole concept of Kendall, or Shiv, or even Roman himself becoming CEO is totally laughable. There is no skill or talent to any of them clumsily bulldozing their way to the top after their father's passing. It is an empty, meaningless title that won't bring them the thing they're truly fighting for, and until they realize that, the trauma inflicted upon them by their father will run in their blood for a long time. Hey, thanks for watching everyone. This video was a little bit messy, but I really enjoyed just vomiting my thoughts and opinions into a video at random. Please do give this video a like and consider subscribing to help me build my own media empire. I have another video recorded and ready to enter the old edit machine, so keep your eyes peeled. Bye, 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 bye.